would go through those first. Let me just find them. All right, the first one is from Alfonso. He is asking how to maintain a sourdough starter so it's always strong and balanced, and how to make it stronger in case of reduction of the capacity on open crumb. I don't actually believe that the starter helps open crumb. I mean, you should always strive to have a strong starter. So, all right, it should be. All right, I see that. Hang on. Maybe I can make it mono. How does that work? Better? So to keep a strong starter, the way I do it is I will often feed the starter at a very high proportion. So, just a dot, or about 1 gram to like 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of water, or maybe 100 grams of flour, 100 grams of water. It takes maybe 24 hours to grow, and then if you do that a couple of times, the starter will usually triple, or maybe like 3.5 times the size. And then after that, you can abuse it for a while, so you can feed it 1 to 1 to 1, and it'll be fine. It'll stay strong as long as you feed it regularly. But if you then have a time where you just keep it, you may want to redo the large feedings. When it comes to open crumb, I know a lot of people say it has to do with handling, but in my experience, it's mostly the flour that makes the difference. Yes, you have to get fermentation right for it to work as well, but even with the right fermentation, you might not have an open crumb if you have the wrong flour. So the next question is from Nancy Peterson. It's about the proofer that I use, the Braun Taylor. She's asking, why do you set the proofer to 86 if dough temperature on many recipes are 78 or close to it? The reason I set it to 86 Fahrenheit, 30 degrees Celsius, is because I'm lazy. I just like my sourdough to ferment fast, and at 30 degrees Celsius, it'll grow the fastest. But you have to be aware of carryover fermentation. So once you take it out of the proofer, it's going to be a really hot dough that ferments fast. So you kind of need to take it out early, which is why I recommend 25% growth. Then, the time where you are shaping the dough and the time it takes to cool down after you put it in the fridge, it'll finish fermenting then, right? So that's also, and it's one thing I'm going to redo my master recipe, because I say 25%, but it's really 25% if you ferment really hot. If you ferment at room temperature, say 21 degrees, is that 70 Fahrenheit, I think, then you maybe want to go to 50% growth. And if you ferment really cold, maybe 18 or 15 degrees, around, is that 60, I think, Fahrenheit, then you want to go to 100%. So it really depends on what the ambient temperature is. And you always, I also touch on this in my fermentation video, is you have to think about the carryover heat and the time it's going to take to cool the dough down, because as long as it's above 4 degrees Celsius, it will keep fermenting. So do I ferment more quickly to reduce sourness? Not really. I have to say sourness is still one of those things that I find difficult to achieve. People ask for mouth puckering sourness, and I think that's really hard to make, in my opinion, and I haven't really found the perfect way for it. My latest theory on the subject is you will need a starter that you've fed at a very high or low proportion, so maybe like 1 to 1 to 1, but then you let it stay for days until it gets like really sour, and then you keep feeding at that until you need it. Then when you need it, you're going to need a high proportion of that compared to the dough, so maybe higher than the 20% that's pretty common for fermentation. All right. So I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name since it looks like it's in Arabic, but how do you achieve sour bread? Well, while we're waiting for that, I can answer LMLPHX. Ezekiel bread. It's not something I heard about. Is it just a sprouted grain bread, or is it a very specific bread? By chilling the leaven. So basically making a discard bread? Is that what you're saying? I know the discard can get pretty sour, so that would make sense. Viral, I'm pretty sure it does. It's being said the colder you go, there's two different types of sourness, and you really want the yogurty kind, and I think that's what I heard anyway. That should be mostly common at around 25 degrees Celsius. We'll do a quick 77. A stiff starter and chilling it. Well, I'll definitely make an experiment with it. A stiff starter, is it like 50% hydration or something? Alright, Patrick is asking, will I make a recipe for high altitudes? I'd love to, but I live like 2 meters above sea level, so all I can go on is what I can read about high altitude baking. The general things are like lower the hydration, and I think bake at a lower temperature as well. But open crumb. Have you looked at my open crumb recipe, and then maybe apply some of those rules for it? But again, the flour that you use is very important. Well, rye in general seems to make very sour bread no matter how you do it, which is, I guess a thing. Hilly is asking if I have experience with rye starter, or does it make a difference to a wheat starter? I honestly think it doesn't make a lot of difference. If you have a very sour rye starter, maybe that could make for a more sour bread. But it has to be a large enough proportion to carry over, or you would have to take the fermentation so far that the bread actually gets sour. But then you run the chance of destroying the gluten. So I think it's a little bit of a dangerous game, right? You have to find the perfect spot where it's just fermented enough to be sour, but you still have enough gluten strength to bake a bread that's not going to be like entirely flat. All right, we'll go to the next email. That is from Kasper. It's in Danish. I'll translate. He is saying, so at the bakery you can buy a cake that's really moist. Sometimes also like like a French country loaf or other breads like that that are really moist. And then he's like, how do you get that structure? And I think that's really easy. The higher the hydration, the more moist the crumb will be. I mean, some people actually don't like that. I actually really like that, but it's again a matter of taste. So the higher, I mean, a cake has a really high hydration. You think about making a cake batter, that's like a probably 180% hydration. It's really thin, right? But then it's leavened a different way. But with bread, 80 to 90%. That's more than high enough to get a moist crumb. And some people, the first time they make a high hydration bread, they're like, why is it so wet? I don't like that. But that's what you get from it. It also helps the bread stay moist longer because there's simply just more water to evaporate in there. All right. Let's see. There's one from Georgie. He said he moved back to the UK and can't get oven spring. Georgie, are you on the stream? I mean, LM, I've actually thought about making a video about sprouted grain bread, not specifically Ezekiel, but if you can send me some information about it, I'd love to read it. So just find my email on the About page on YouTube and you can just use that. Well, Georgie is saying he has a problem with his breads not getting a lot of oven spring. From what he's saying here, I can't really see that he has a bulk fermentation. So that would mean the bread is like grossly underproofed, but that usually gives you more of an explosive bread, and the overproofed would give you a flat bread. So it's a little... UK is notorious for lacking oven spring. Is it something in the water or? Well, I think that's right, Kate. But I think you can always nurse them back to health. People always say my starter died, and chances are it didn't die. Chances are it's just being sluggish, and sometimes they need a little love and tender care, and they'll get back to it. And like I said earlier, like feeding at the super high proportion will make your starter very active. And okay, BB. And the reason that works is because you're giving like a tiny amount of yeast a lot of food, right? So it's going to eat that food and multiply like crazy. All right, and Viral sent something here. What temperature do you set your fridge for retard? Yes, I have mine set to... It's set to 2 degrees Celsius. But I think on my wireless thermometer I have in there, it says 4. Which is cold enough to stop fermentation. Let me see what those are in Fahrenheit. 4 C 2 Fahrenheit. That's about 39. My audio levels is low. Alright. Let me see. It's turned up all the way. It's because the microphone isn't next to my face. Hello? Is it better? Jerry's asking the difference between a starter and levain. The difference is in the word, I think. A starter is usually the one you carry on, and a levain is like a starter you make specifically for a recipe that you then use up in the bread that you bake. Some people do it because they want to match the flours to whatever they have in the recipe. I mean, in the beginning, I would always make a levain. And honestly, I thought just using my wheat starter would be fine. I mean, I couldn't detect any difference in the bread. So I think levains are overrated, to be honest. Unless you maybe want to go for different hydration, which does seem to have an effect on the bread, right? Especially stuff like panettone or something like that, right? And do you know how much your dough proofs percentage during the retard? It viral almost doesn't proof at all. There's really no growth in it. I mean, of course, there will be minimal growth while it's cooling off, but it's not really something I can detect. But then again, I think detecting how much bread proofs in a banneton is kind of difficult. So maybe it's growing a little bit, but it's not something I can see. David is asking if his bread that grew to 25% and is now like 100%, if it's ruined. Well, chances are it might not be, but is it shaped? Yeah, Viral, I only let my dough proof 25%, but that's because I have it in the proofer set really warm, like 30 degrees, 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the carryover heat, because the dough's so warm, will make it proof. Like when I then shape the bread, there's still 20 minutes when it's outside, and when it's cooling down, it'll keep fermenting. Mike is asking what ratio do you feed your starter and how often during the week. I will usually only feed when I bake, and depending on the situation, it's usually 1 to 5 to 5, I would say. Unless it feels sluggish or something, and then I'll maybe start the day before and do the 1 to 100 to 100. It does continue viral as long as the temperature is above 4 degrees, but of course, the closer it is to 4 degrees, the less it'll ferment. So it's like it really happens mostly in the beginning while it's in the fridge. But I have tried, one time where I didn't close the fridge properly and my dough overproofed just from the, heat coming in from the outside. Fart is asking any thoughts on second proofed after shaping. I did an experiment where I didn't really see a lot of difference, to be honest. But of course it will proof. I don't know what it'll give you that you don't already give from the bulk fermentation. I think it's just easier to, let it grow during bulk fermentation. It doesn't seem to make any difference on the crumb. So I've kind of put it away as not so important, to be honest. It's just like an extra step, like the whole, then first you have to do an autolyse, and then you have to mix in the salt, and then you have to mix in the starter, and it really doesn't make any difference when I do it, when I just mix everything, right? So again, just taking both proofs and putting them into one seems to give me the same results as the other one. Nix is saying I have white rye and whole wheat starters, but I'm just a novice. I think everybody has like 8 starters in the beginning or something. I know I had different ones and different hydrations, and different flours and stuff, but these days they're all just mixed into one that I just use for everything. I mean, David, you can't really do the bulk in the fridge normally, but I don't know what your fridge is set to, but it would grow very slowly. I mean, if you do a cold bulk, you'd probably have to do, a fridge set to something like 15 degrees Celsius, about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. If you just put it in the fridge at a very cold temperature, it would probably take a week to proof, I would guess. I haven't tried it. But okay, I see more people are mentioning overproofing in the fridge. And like I said, the temperature that your fridge is set to is very important for retard. I mean, it needs to be below 39 degrees Celsius, at or below, because that's where fermentation stops. So if it's higher than that, say it's 5 or 6 degrees, it could still grow, and like if it's at the wrong point, it might overproof. Let's see here. LM is asking, what do you think about grinding your own flour from fresh wheat? I think that's awesome. I do it a lot. I have wheat, I have spelt, I have kamut, I think. I have I wish I had some einkorn. So I mean that just makes for more flavorful bread, and also if you're not careful, it might like give you explosive fermentation. Depends on how fresh it is. What temp is your fridge at? At what? Whom? Oh, my fridge is set to 2 degrees Celsius, but my temperature gauge measures 4 degrees Celsius, so 39. Inga Ölandshvede, or I kind of, when I use ancient grains, I will treat them the same. I will treat them as whole wheat. They do have a somewhat less amount of gluten, but if you use a good bread flour with it, and you use 20%, you can treat it the same. If you want to make 100% ancient wheat bread, it depends on what type it is and how much gluten it has. Like, let's say spelt. If you do 100% spelt bread and it's not like a whole grain spelt, it'll be super sticky and annoying. So it kind of depends on the situation. I would say try it out, but I would say if you're new to baking with it, mix it with some regular bread flour, and chances are there's a better chance of success. But then start out with 20%, try with 40%, see where it is. If it gets super sticky, then you may want to like reduce the hydration, so that way it isn't sticky. Fresh milled rye is my favorite. Yes, I love rye flour, which you probably have noticed if you read any of my recipes. They will usually have rye in them because I just love the taste of rye. What does your starter smell like when you first take it out of the fridge before feeding? It smells like nail polish remover or something. It's pretty nasty. So, but then one feeding, it's fine. But again, if you want to keep that like really sour acidic thing going, You want to feed at a low proportion, and then feed 1 to 1 to 1. Then you'll keep that. Um, oh, it's the bubbles. Ale Blundo is asking, my starter's hydrated in 75%. It has small bubbles. There's other. I don't think the size of the bubbles matters at all for open crumb. While it does seem like logic, I just don't. I've sometimes my starter have like big holes and sometimes small holes. It doesn't seem to affect the crumb in that way. The flour does. Suggestions for unsuccessful bakes. I mean, most unsuccessful bakes can be eaten, in my opinion. I mean, they should be really terrible for you not to be able to eat them. The only bread I actually ever threw out didn't have any salt in it. That was just terrible. Acidity is better for rye, making it less gummy. Yes, I agree, Viral. I mean, it's like if you really love that sour taste, it's going to be difficult to ferment it just right. So you still get oven spring, but you still get that acidity, right? But if you look at, the San Francisco bread, that doesn't have amazing oven spring either. I mean, it's kind of flat. I mean, I'm not saying it's a flat bread, but it's not like that those Instagram breads with the exploding oven spring. Aaron is asking if my gochujang bread is something I usually make. I don't make it a lot, but I certainly make it. I think it's delicious. I love gochujang. I love a lot of Korean stuff, so I think it's delicious. It's spicy but it also has like an amazing fermented taste. So I really love that, and the pairing with the garlic is just amazing. And especially one of my sons loves anything Asian, so he's like, oh my god, that's so good. Troy's asking, are you a baker or what is your job? I I would say I'm a baker. I would say I'm a professional baker in the sense that I make money off baking. It's just not, in a bakery. But my job is I've worked as a software engineer for many many years, and now I'm a Scrum Master, who's a person that helps development teams perform the best. So that's my day job. Mark is saying my YouTube algorithm is filled with your experiments. Thank you. JC is asking, have you ever used starter and yeast in a poolish? I haven't actually ever tried to mix those two things. I've baked many many breads with yeast and many with sourdough. I never tried to mix them. I guess you could use it as a flavoring for a yeasted bread, but then why not just ferment it the old-fashioned way with starter? I don't know. Maybe somebody has a question or an answer to why that would be great. Well, Jesse, you're right. It does require leadership skills. I, I mean, I just what I like about my day to day job is I get to help people be great, and that's kind of what I feel like I do on YouTube too. I help people, get results, which I love hearing about it. I'm so glad that so many of you are getting results. the reason why I even started doing the whole sourdough thing was because I thought all the information I could find when I was trying to learn how to do it was very unspecific. That was kind of the problem for me. So I'm like, I figured out how it worked specifically, and usually I would just make my experiments at home, and then I would, tell people, oh, this is how it works. But then I accidentally made an experiment video, and people were like, that's awesome. So then I started doing that. Let's see here. Mike is saying, thank you, Sune. I got started on sourdough baking in 2020. Yeah, like a lot of people. And have been baking bread almost every week since then. Yeah. I mean, I think baking your own bread is just so satisfying, and I love, everybody around me, my family, everybody, they just always want to have bread, and they're like, we don't like the stuff from the store. Can you make some for me? So it's just a great gift, I guess. So Viral is asking about autolyse. Autolyse is tool to develop your gluten early. So I don't really know how it entered the sourdough world, because fermentation is so damn long that there's absolutely no reason why you should use it, as far as I can tell. I mean, yes, I after I mix the dough, I kind of leave it around for an hour, because then the gluten is basically developed already, and for me, so you don't really need autolyse, in my opinion. Like by the time, and which is why I also made recipes for no knead bread, because they ferment for like hours and hours, and the gluten will be developed. And yes, when you take it out of the container, it looks kind of saggy and stuff, but it takes like a few turns with the scraper, and you can tell that gluten is really well developed. Let me see here. Roman Italian pizza on YouTube uses both starter and yeast. All right. I mean, like I said, I guess you could use the starter for the taste. It would give you that like fermented taste that we really like in sourdough bread, but you could ferment it faster. Laney is saying, I need your advice. I've had a starter in the fridge for about a year and has a lot of hooch on it. Can you use it after mixing, or should I begin a new one? You can absolutely use it. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a secret. I have a starter that I've been keeping in the back of my fridge for 2.5 years, and I plan to make a video with it. Because, honestly, every time I've taken out a starter that's been in the like a cold fridge and really well sealed, it grows like to at least double the first time I feed it. So honestly, I don't think it's a problem at all, and you might have to help it a little along, but it's fine. It should be fine, and I would use it. So, all right. Let's see. RM is saying about your website, why do a lot of cooking websites have the same, very similar UI? Yeah, for the recipes, that's an add-on that I pay for. It's called, what is it called? Something recipes. I don't remember right now. But it's really well made, and it makes it easy to type up a recipe, and it like you can change the templates for the look and everything. So that's just why it kind of looks the same. Colorful Pixels, I'm finding that when I use a stand mixer with the same flour and hydration, the dough is runnier. Do you think maybe you overmixed it? I know you can't really overmix it, but when do you stop? I mean, you should really stop when the gluten is developed. I usually will run the mixer at 3 for about 5 minutes, and then I check the dough, and then I go in steps of maybe 2 minutes at a time until it's developed. If I use a mixer, it shouldn't get runnier, but I think it was Breadcode who did an experiment, or was it maybe it was Bake with Jack. Somebody did an experiment, and like at the end, if you just leave the dough by itself, it'll be fine again. I haven't tried it myself, but I think that makes sense to me. Let's see here. Thanks to your experiments, I skip auto-lease, which saves me a lot of time. Also mixing salt and starter early on. Results are just great. Yeah, Mert, thank you. I mean, there's just people that still, go with that old school way of doing things, but I don't really see any difference other than there's a big chance you'll forget to mix in the salt because you have to have it in an extra step. You're welcome, Lainey. Edward is saying, I'm not able to get my dough to pass the window pane test. The dough is always breaking. I mean, you might be doing the window pane test wrong. I mean, you can't just like yank it, right? You need to kind of go a little slow and pull it out further and further. Or maybe your flour is very low gluten, which means that there isn't a lot of gluten. But the question is, what kind of results do you get even if the window pane test breaks? Are they still good? Jesse's asking, do you plan on updating your bread calculator? My bread calculator is updated as often as I get an email asking for something. Adding different inclusion facts. What do you... Well, Jesse, send me an email with what you actually think, and I'll figure out whether or not that's something worth doing. I mean, if I'm adding something, it should be something that I think is worth something to everybody, or to most bakers, not like very fringe things. But if you have a look here, some of the latest stuff I've added. What was that? Oh yeah, I made a like sugars, because someone was saying, well, I use honey, but that has a hydration, right? So I'd like to add that so that gets into the hydration. So that's some of the latest stuff I added. But I mean, whatever suggestions you have for the bread calculator, just send it to my email and I'll have a look at it. And we can get it to be the best damn tool there is for making anything baked. Yes, Kate is saying it's Baked with Jack, who made that overmixing video. Yeah, he also did a video that I really liked where he was like pouring salt directly on the yeast to show that it didn't really destroy it, which is also what I think. It's just, I don't know what it is. Sometimes people get this thing, they heard it, so now it's just the truth, right? Viral's also saying acidic starter can also make the dough fall apart. That is the problem. I mean, the gluten will be broken down by acidity. So when you're trying to make that sour bread, it might break down the gluten, so your bread can't stay together. Yeah, thank you, Ricardo. I mean, I would say my approach is scientific-ish, because at least the videos, I make one experiment and then I make an assumption based on that, right? If it's true scientific, you'd have to repeat it 50 times. But oftentimes, I will make this video and then I incorporate it into my normal baking, and then, I will see if I'm actually right or wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'll make a new experiment to show it. Let's see here. There's so many questions now. Yes, sour cream. Yeah, that would definitely. I mean, the yogurt and stuff that also changes the hydration, right? So having the hydrations of those, I mean, it's not going to be perfectly precise, but it'll certainly give you an idea around where the hydration is, at least the perceived hydration. Um, Thank you, Doug. Yeah, I have. I moved the mic closer, Kate. Do you have any thought on bread spice? I don't know what bread spice is, so can you explain what that is? Um, Jesse saying that if you have too high hydration, that could prevent a good window pane. Definitely. I mean, like look at some of the videos people do where they're like doing 120% focaccia or something. That stuff almost looks like pancake dough, right? Doug is asking to tell me about my guitars. Well, I have so many, so I don't know what specific to talk about. I have a lot of guitars. I've played guitar since I was, I guess, 7 years old. I got started on electric guitars when I was 17, and I have played with many, many, many bands. And the latest one, I'm not in a band right now. The latest one was at a previous workplace where we actually got to play. It was our Christmas party, but we got to play at like a really, really great venue in Copenhagen, which I was stoked about having played there because we, had the actual techs that work there do our sound and lighting and stuff. That was amazing. Yeah, Viral. I've seen that video too. He's mixing up a little bit of flour at different hydrations to see how it works. I actually tried his method and I found that he was using a little too little flour for you to make a proper determination of whether or not it works. But I think the basic idea is good. Maybe just a little more flour. Or you could just, mix in water little by little when you don't know it. Start at maybe 60% hydration, see where that's going. And then if it's like way too fluid, at that point you could recalculate the recipe to figure out how much flour you needed to add. A high protein bread flour is meant to be mixed with a certain percentage of ancient grain flour when making bread. I don't know. I don't think like not a certain percentage. I think if you have a high protein, well, high protein doesn't necessarily mean high gluten. So let's say high gluten flour because that's what you need. If you have a high gluten flour, you can mix more ancient grains with low gluten in and still have a proper bread. I think like if you have a really high, like let's just say you have a Manitoba with 15% protein and all of that is like really good gluten, you could probably do a 50% ancient grain bread with like great oven spring still and still great gluten development. But I mean, it's all in trying it. I mean, you need to know the flours you buy, which is why I will always buy the same brand. Because then I got to know that and I don't need to learn all over again. And sometimes I try a new flour and mix that in, see how it works. Sometimes it works exactly the same, and other times it doesn't. So, Who Next is asking, do you have a lot of amps too? I have 2 amps. I have a flat response amp that I use with my guitar modeler. It's line 6. And then I have a Mesa Boogie 50 watt tube amp, which sounds amazing. And you need to crank it so loud that it's just not. It's I don't know where to use it, to be honest. I can't use it at home. So Kate's saying, hold up, high protein doesn't mean high gluten. Nope, unfortunately, and necessarily not, because gluten requires two different proteins to be present, and that's the problem often with the ancient grains, is that they might be higher in the one kind, but not the other kind, which means that the actual gluten bonds you'll get if you make a dough with only that with that flour might make for not very good gluten development. So looking at the protein number is just part of the truth, unfortunately. Oh yes, I'm still on the... Yeah, here I am. Hello. I'm still new to this. I made a couple of different screens. I should have probably used this one where I'm in the corner, huh? Alright. Yeah, so high protein equals high gluten is another well-traveled myth. Yes, unfortunately it is. It's because often the brands won't say if they have high gluten. So like going by the protein amount is like an indicator, but it's not necessarily the truth. So you can buy one that has 15%. I mean, sometimes you buy, well, if you use like very coarsely ground whole grain, for example, there's other reasons why gluten development can be not so good. Some of the, I think it's the bran, when the bran's hydrated, there's some chemicals in there that help break down gluten. But also, like the actual shards that is in the like very coarse stuff can sort of hinder the gluten development as well. You watch my videos at 2x speed, all right? I mean, there's this whole thing with you know, playing music at like double the pitch as well and double the speed, like on TikTok or something. So I guess that's a thing too. Well, the corner looks good, but I don't really have anything to do over here right now. It's just if you had some specific questions about how to make recipes, we could type it in here. That's... Oh, Vital Wheat Gluten works amazingly well to supplement wheat flours. Yes, that's basically gluten washed out of a flour and just kept at that. And if you don't know, I have a tool called Vital Wheat Gluten Calculator, which if you want to get to a certain target percentage in your flour, you can type up. So let's say your flour is 10%, 10 grams, and I think the Vital Wheat Gluten I use maybe has 78 grams per 100 grams, and you want to get to 15 grams, then it tells you, oh, and you need 1 kilo of flour. Then it says you need to mix 926 grams of your current flour with 74 grams of Vital Wheat Gluten. So let's watch. It says I was gifted a large jar of dried starter. What I will usually do is mix the dried starter with, like by weight, with the same amount of water, and then that makes 100% hydration starter, and then you can just feed that as you would usually do. So like let's say you use 25 grams of dried starter and 25 grams of water. You dissolve that completely, and then you feed it with I don't know, 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of water. That should make for a nice 100% hydration starter. So Jesse's asking, what's one of your next experiments that you want to do? That's a good question. I don't have any in the books. So if you have anything you'd like to see, this is the time for telling me, I guess. Elizabeth is asking, when you mill your own flour for home baking, do you need to let it sit for a period of time before baking? Or is that only necessary for a large volume? I will usually grind my flour right before I bake, and I don't really have big problems with that. So that's my experience. You know, it might be different for other people, or maybe it has to do with how old the grain is. Like if you have a very, very fresh grain, maybe that'll be worse. But I've heard people tell me that, and maybe that's a myth. It's not my experience anyway. Let's see here. Mike's saying I get flour from a local mill in the Netherlands. Gluten is around 14%. Yes. I mean, I used to use a flour from a local mill as well, which, like, it's an amazing flour. But I just wanted to use, I use now Caputo Manitoba Oro. And I use that because that's the closest thing I can get to American bread flours. And most of the viewers of the channel are in America, so I want to use a flour where they can buy that, like buy an American flour and get similar results. That's kind of my thought on it. But speaking of TikTok, what do you feel about it being used to promote or influence elections or teens? Well, that's very political, but I think any use of social media to influence people in elections, I mean, depending on what it is, if it's a politician influencing people to vote for them with their views, I think that's fine. If it's Facebook being used to, you know, push certain agendas with ads, I think that's totally wrong. I mean, you may disagree. I'm from Denmark. I have probably very different political views than most of you guys. But so we all like bread, right? Except for the 2-year starter. Yes, that's definitely. I think that would be an interesting video to see how it does. So who next is saying I found whole wheat flour at Walmart in the US that has a high protein but does not absorb water well. Well, that's interesting. So is it actually whole wheat? Are you sure? Or is it because sometimes they sell it and it's still sifted? I mean, usually if you have, and that's what a really good reason to mill at home is that you mill entire wheat berries and you know what's coming out of that, right? I'll usually use my grain on very fine flour. I don't necessarily want my bread to be very rustic in that sense. So I might even take very coarse whole grain and run it through my mill as well. I mean, that's just how I like it. So I think maybe your flour isn't it's probably a filter or yeah, they probably took out some of the parts of it. Yes, I know, Mike, there's lots of viewers in Europe, and but I mean, Caputo Manitoba Oro, it's from Italy in Europe, so you can get that. I'm sure there's local options that would work fine as well. I mean, I make videos with like store-bought bread flour in the beginning. Yes, it couldn't take nearly as much hydration, but it still made great bread. So, unless it's influencing them to eat more bread, that's kind of what I try to do. I guess I'm anti-keto or something. I mean, people ask me to make keto bread, but I don't know how you make bread without flour. Well, I guess I did make that rice bread from Chef Steps. That was actually really good, which is gluten free as well. Inga's saying I wish to bake only with ancient grains. Used to use Manitoba, 50% combination. Now I changed it with Ölands wheat with 15% protein, but the result is flat. I think with Ølandshvide, you probably need to go a lot lower hydration. Or maybe if you can get a whole grain version of it. I mean, it depends on what kind you're getting. But I would go for a bread or a dough that's like when it's mixed, you can shape it and it'll stay in that shape, right? That's kind of how I made some of my ancient grain recipes. Is that they won't, or you can bake it in a pan. So Doug's saying, what about experiments with different wheat flours from different countries? French, German, US, Japan, China? That would be amazing. I mean, anything any viewer wants to send me, I'd be willing to try that out and see what kind of bread it makes. That would be awesome. But I mean, it's really difficult to get it. I mean, my girlfriend is in the US right now. She's gonna get me some American flour. I'm gonna have some fun with that. So if any of you are from France, Germany, Japan, China, or other countries, some of that local wheat, that would be great to try out. So write me on my email. I'll send you my address and you can send it to me. So LA is saying most of my loaves are 100% fresh milled, 80% hard red wheat, and 20% hard white wheat. Yes, but those are really good flours for that kind of things. We don't really have hard wheat available here in Denmark, at least. It's soft wheat, all of it. I don't know why. Maybe it doesn't grow here, or... BB is saying it would be great if you made videos using that mock mill you have. I mean, I have a couple where I've used the mock mill. But yeah, I guess we could do more, freshly milled flour. I mean, I think the whole sprouted grains, because those need milling too, that would be very interesting. A tutorial on different types of wheat, hard, soft, winter. Yes, I mean, that would mostly be based on research I would do, so that wouldn't be my own knowledge. But, I mean, it would still be helpful, I guess. Have you ever used different water for taste, like New York water, Philadelphia water? No, I haven't. But I did watch a video with Babish and Joshua Weissman, where did they make pizza with like different waters or something, and there was really no difference. I think what makes a difference, and that's I made a water experiment not so long ago, right, where I actually used a water with no minerals in it, demineralized water, and that one didn't even make a big difference in the final taste. I mean, I used carbonated water. I used my tap water, which I know is like extremely hard, so lots of calcium, and I tried to filter it as well. They all really tasted kind of the same, so I don't think the water makes a big difference unless you put Kool-Aid into it or something. I keep my starter at a 133 radio. I'm kind of a novice at this. What happens when you change it? Nothing happens to the starter itself. You probably weren't here in the beginning, Alan, but if you feed at a higher proportion, so like little starter to a lot of flour and a lot of water, that will make for a more active starter. Also, the lower the proportion, so if it's like 1-1-1, the more the taste that's in the starter will stay there. If you do it at a very high proportion, it'll be a very fruity, flowery taste or smell. There's no like residual sourness or anything like that. How does protein impact hydration? It doesn't really. I think it's other things in the flour that that does that. I mean, definitely the proportion of things like bran and other things from the whole grain will definitely change it. But there are other things as well. I think for me, high hydration in itself isn't something that you need to go for. You know, the right hydration for your flour is what you need to go for. Morten, hi Morten, is saying I make peach every week for people with a very little amount of yeast, and it's proofed for 5 days. Can I use the rest for the next dough? You can, but it probably won't ferment it. So you still need to add some yeast, but it might add flavor. Do you know if sourdough fermentation reduces the amount of carbohydrates? This is getting to be a little bit scientific. I don't know for sure. I do know, because I'm diabetic myself, I do know that sourdough bread has less of an impact on my blood sugar than like store-bought bread. So, that's about the glycemic index. It could be the explanation. I don't know. It requires probably a scientist to look into that, why it's different. Yeah, you're welcome, Jesse. I mean, I'd love to do this more often. I've been wanting to do it for a long time. So, and it seems like there's a lot of you having a lot of questions. So, and I mean, it doesn't just have to be questions. We can do other things. Like maybe you can, you can send me your bread for me to review, or yeah, I don't know, whatever. Yeah, Ella is saying it's a bummer not having hard wheat berries. Yes, I agree. It's well, I'm sure it has to do with it's difficult to grow it here or something. We have a very in Denmark it's a mild climate, but it's pretty cold, which is why traditionally we've grown rye, which is probably why we eat a lot of rye. So Troy is asking, how do you determine the proper hydration of a flour? When it's a new flour, you need to try it out. There's really no other way. You can do it by just mixing flour and water and see how fluid it is. But I would definitely also leave it around to see how the gluten develops. So kind of an autolyse of a smaller amount of flour. I think maybe I would do 100. But honestly, I will usually just bake bread with it. And then I mix at a low hydration for starters, and then I mix in more water little by little to see how it reacts, and then I'm like, oh, this is good. And do you know what I mean? You don't need to like nail it the first time, but then you also have bread. Glycemic index of sourdough is 54 versus 100 of store-bought bread. Okay, that's a big difference. But also, I think things like fiber will help you, lower the impact on your blood sugar as well. So definitely always go for some, whole grain in your bread. That makes it healthier, and it also tastes better. I mean, bread flour is pretty bland tasting, right? So that's why I usually always have 20% of something else in there. I could do a diagnosis live stream. Yeah, I mean, that would be fun. I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong in sourdough, and I've probably done them all myself, probably just earlier. And now it seems like most of my bread doesn't go wrong. But sometimes there's still some times where I'm like, why doesn't it grow at all? And I, honestly don't know. I'm not doing anything different. Bread post-mortem. Yeah, sure. Does it irritate you when people confuse Holland with Denmark? Not really. I like Dutch people. I don't have a problem with those, except that they're a little taller than us. I don't like that. But yeah. But I'm tall enough, I guess. Doug saying store-bought bread also often has sugar added. Yeah, and probably a whole bunch of other things that you don't really want to eat. So, if you have the choice and the time, never go for store-bought. But I mean, I have to say we have a lot of great bakeries in Denmark, and they also make unhealthy bread, but they certainly have a lot of great sourdough and everything else. Yeah, and pastries. Viral saying, could locally grown grains with lower gluten forming properties and displaying the bread products from those grains can help with sustainability efforts. I mean, could it help? Definitely. I mean, for anything, I think it's always better to buy local. It's not always possible, and I certainly don't do that when we talk about YouTube. But I will do that when we talk about doing my own stuff. I try not to buy, vegetables from other places, or I try to get, eggs from a farm nearby, or that sort of thing. So I think that's what we can all do to, make less of an impact. I mean, sending stuff from China, even on a giant boat, is not, good. You probably don't get much food products from there, but you know what I mean. Well, I didn't say all Dutch people were tall, Mike, but yeah, that's not tall. My son is 154, so, but I'm 194. So I guess it's not, well, his mom is really small. Sometimes I just decide to bake bread without any planning. How much commercial yeast should I use? Well, it depends on what kind you use. When I'm not making videos, I will usually use fresh yeast. And I will use, if I just want to make a bread in a couple of hours, I will use 25 grams with a kilo of flour, which is on the low side, but then it doesn't get that yeasty taste. Yes, we have lots of tall people here. I remember, when I went to see the ex-wife's family who lives in Michigan, they were like, "Oh my God, you're a giant." I'm like, "No." Yeah, I know that, Mike. I mean, it fits here as well. I mean, I'm definitely not a small person. I'm definitely not like the tallest in Denmark, but I'm still pretty tall. Oh, who Nix is saying something about barley malt syrup. Do you have a question about it, or? Dogs loved seeing me having trouble sliding the bread off the peel. I mean, if it's just something like that, I'm just gonna leave it in the video, right? I definitely had underestimated how high hydration that bread was and how sticky it was. It needed a lot of rice flour to even slide off that peel, and it's still stuck. More bloopers. Yeah, I should keep them. Sometimes I've put bloopers from my voiceovers in there, or when I try to learn how to say broa de milho in Portuguese, which apparently I learned how to say it in Brazilian Portuguese. But I mean, I don't have any Portuguese friends, but I do have a Brazilian Portuguese friend. Kate, you can't be just 150, or you can't be 59 centimeters. That's just too small. You probably mean 159. So 1989 DP3 is asking if your sourdough starter deflated, but it still floats. Will it be effective? You know what? I have an experiment where I, have a freshly fed starter, and one I took out of the fridge that's been in there for a week, and that one still made pretty good bread. Yes, the oven spring wasn't as good as the freshly baked one, so I think if it's deflated, go for it. I don't think that's a big problem. What happened to the dad jokes? Well, it was difficult to record, so I need to get my green screen up and running again. But they're not like dead forever. I want to do them again. I thought it was a fun little thing. Hunix is saying, it tastes good in dough, but sugar. Barley malt syrup must have sugar. Yes, I think it has sugar. It's made from sprouted barley malt, probably mixed with something. I never actually looked up how you make that. I do have in most of my recipes that use barley malt syrup, I have a pretty good alternative, which is like cooking down, brown sugar and beer. So malt powder that can be used for the same, but I personally like the syrup better. My icon in the corner has hair. When will it be updated? I guess I need to go back on Fiverr and have the guy who made me a Simpsons. No, that's not the Simpsons portrait. I don't know when it will be updated. Maybe I should just put my face down there. No, I don't have a problem with my lack of hair. It's just it happens. It's a thing in my family. So, do I have a go-to book for baking? I have a couple of books that I've read. I don't really use them much nowadays. It's backwards. Peter Reinhardt, an American baker. This one is called The Bread Baker's Apprentice. I learned a lot from that book, like way before I started making videos. There's some good stuff. I have another one by him called something whole grain breads. Yeah. Let me see if I can. There should be an option to flip it. Configure video. Maybe you can't do that while it's running. It's just a bit silly to. Oh, here it is. No, vertically. That's upside down. That's not going to work. All right. But do you see it now? Now it looks right. Peter Reinhardt's Whole Grain Bread. That's a really good book too. But I have so many. One bread or a book that I can. No, that's not the one. What is it? Oh, that's a general cooking book. But I mean, just look at the title. Cooking for Geeks. I even got to beta test the version 2 of it that the author made. It's really good stuff. I have a lot of the things that I know about temperatures and stuff that comes from this book. And then I spent a lot of time with Heston Blumenthal and everything he wrote and made on TV. Barley flour, is that used in Denmark as an ingredient? Not commonly, but what is called malt flour is probably the same as barley flour, I would think. That's like fermented, or not fermented, sprouted barley that's dried after it's sprouted and then milled. 100% rye bread. Do you have a good recipe video? Yes, I have a recipe video. It's one of my first ones, to be honest. I don't know if I can... Well, I don't have to be secretive about it. We can do it here. So, Foodgeek, rye bread. So there's a whole bunch of stuff about rye bread and how it's done and how it's made and why it's healthy, and then there's a video at the bottom. Oh, smørrebrød. That's amazing stuff. So just Google Foodgeek rye bread and you'll get it, and the videos here at the bottom as well. So Alan is asking, when I bake sourdough bread, I get a lovely rise but struggle to get an open crumb. Well, again, Foodgeek open crumb. I have a specific recipe for open crumb, and it explains that flour, I mean, what's important? Fermentation is important, the flour is important, hydration, the right hydration, and shaping. Those are all factors, right? But if you don't have the right flour and you don't have the right fermentation, you're not going to get open crumb. Loved your Heston triple cooked chips. That's a very old one. I love those chips. Those are the most amazing chips you can ever try. So if nobody watched my very old video, go have a look at it. They're kind of a hassle to make, but they're worth it. Yeah, the loaf pan, that's cool. Yeah, that was in the rye recipe. A lot of people ask me, where did you get it? And, I got it from a Danish company, and they're always... I asked them several times, well, I know people who want it. Don't you want to sell it abroad or something? And they're like, nope, we don't want to. And it's because the actual pan is made by, handicapped kids as a way of making money. So I don't think they get a lot of them. So it's not like they can just sell like 1,000 a month or something. Who next is saying, when I cold proof at the end, it won't flatten as much after shaping. No, but if you overproofed it though, it'll still deflate when you bake it. Colorful Pixels is saying it seems like a very popular opinion, which is open crumb is overrated. I think open crumb is amazing for some things. I mean, if I'm eating a sandwich with, jelly on it, or I don't like it, but it's texture, and texture is important. So having a bread with like tiny fermentation bubbles is awesome. Having some with medium, it all does something different. So I think the reason many people think it's overrated is because it's actually hard to do, and then it's used as a thing on Instagram to show it off. And yes, those bakers are amazingly good bakers to make it, so it's not like, but it is a flex also. You're right about that. Have you tried to make sourdough sukkerbrød? It sounds like something with sugar. Dutch Frisian sugar bread, yeah, with sugar pearls in them, like the ones that don't dissolve. No, I have never tried that. So it's crunchy. Is there a bread that is your go-to bread? Yes. Well, I mostly bake for my videos, so I will eat whatever I made for that video, even experiments. But you know, my go-to bread if I bake and I'm not making a video. That's basically my master recipe at 80% hydration. 20% rye, 80% bread flour, 80% hydration. And probably an unpopular opinion, but I will make the salt 3% instead of 2%. I just think it's better. That sounds interesting. It doesn't sound very healthy, but it sounds very interesting. What would you put on it, Mike? Ipanaki says your sourdough sandwich bread is absolutely amazing and so easy to make. Really appreciate all your recipes, tips, and tricks. Thank you. I mean, I really like that I got it updated now because it got a lot easier. Like the original sourdough sandwich bread was made back when, you know, I thought different things had to be in a certain order, and you know, I should update the popular ones for being easier. I mean, that one is hand mixed. The original one was made on a machine and all that sort of stuff. So, no, not healthy. Just put butter on it. Well, that's my go-to thing for bread. So, has an experiment ever gone so wrong that you didn't post the video? Well, I can tell you that I've baked at least 5 separate times, recorded a recipe for what is that bread called? Like a super high hydration bread that has a very open crumb. I just couldn't get it to make. I haven't tried it recently. Do 100% butter brioche sourdough. I don't think I ever want to like knead something for 35 minutes again. That was insane. But it did taste amazing. I'll give you that. I mean, that was not even my... yes, Panda Cristal. That's right. So, have I... I mean, there's some times where I didn't think the experiment... Like, I screwed something up that I think kind of took away from the experiment itself, or didn't give necessarily the right idea or something. Or people would be saying, well, you tested it, but you didn't test it right. I don't remember any, but I have certainly done that a couple of times and then just remade the video. Not because I didn't like the first result, but because something happened that influenced the result, and then it wasn't really conclusive in my opinion. Alright, since following your video directions, my bread maker has been retired and donated to charity. That's good. I mean, you know, back in the 90s, I had a bread maker, and I'm like, I loved that it would just make bread for me in the morning, but I wasn't crazy about the crust that you got on those. So I kind of went back to just baking myself again. But back then it was just yeast. For me, sourdough started when I was stuck at home for a month after surgery, and I'm like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, well, I always thought about sourdough bread. I wanted to try and make that. And then I made a starter. Actually, I had a problem making a starter because it was winter, and it was so cold in my kitchen that the starter wouldn't grow, and I didn't understand why. So then, you know, I bought a proofer. That's where I got the Broad and Taylor proofer. And then I'm like, oh, that was easy now. Have I ever tried bulgur wheat? Yes, but not for baking. You know, like a bulgur salad or something, you know, where you cook it and you mix it up with different stuff. That's delicious. How long have I been making sourdough? Well, I think it's about 5 years or something. I mean, I baked for about 6 months before I put out my first recipe. That was my sourdough bread for beginners, which I then remade about 6 months later when I started my YouTube channel, which was before lockdown. And I mean, at that point I didn't just do sourdough bread. You know, now I'm trying to do some different things. I have maybe a secret, but I have a video where I test 7 different ways of making bacon. So that's a bacon experiment. I think you would all like that one. I'm finding the best way to make bacon. And I do love my bacon. I don't know if you've seen this one. I can't really show it the other side upside down, but it says bacon. My Bob F is like, sup, back close to the beginning. Has been great to see your success. I do find commonality and it's funny. Reinhardt, Chef Steps, Blumenthal. I mean, there's some great stuff out there. I'm not, afraid to tell who I'm learning from, but at some point it gets to be your own, I guess. Jesse's saying you should make a bacon sourdough loaf. That'll be a million hits. Yeah, but where do you put it? Inside? Outside? How do you put it in? But yeah, I should. I mean, bacon is amazing. LM saying, I've tried a dozen sites for sourdough until I found yours about 3 years ago. Your recipes and calculators are the best. Are you able to make a living from the channel? Unfortunately, I'm not able to make a living off it. I'm certainly not. I certainly make some money from the channel, so I'm not complaining at all. But it's not enough for me to go, full time on the channel, which I would love to do, because having a 40-hour-a-week job on the side is, a little bit taxing at times. Well, I didn't mention Kenji, but I have. No, I don't have my Kenji book right here, but it's probably in the living room. In the Baltic states, they make a kind of yeasted dumpling with bacon and onion. Oh, that's probably what's it called? Like knödel, which it's probably not called knödel in the Baltic states, but it's the same stuff. They eat it in Eastern Europe, and yeah, I mean, my stepmom is from the Czech Republic, so I grew up on that stuff when I was at my dad's house. Both sweet and savory dumplings. Kind of eat it like you dip it in, like you cut it up and dip it in the sauce and stuff. Yeah, we do some safe too, Bob. We have PIs, but we don't have all the meetings. The company's really not big enough, in my opinion. Everywhere, yes, lots of bacon. Well, that sounds good. Do I have any pets? I used to have a cat, died about 3 years ago, and honestly, it was the best cat ever. So I don't think I could ever replace it. It was just so cuddly, and it would just always lay on my lap when I was like working on anything or watching TV or something. Yeah, cheese and bacon. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I'll get started on a bacon bread. I don't know why I haven't done that. That's kind of sacrilege in a sense. Pierogi. Yes, those are good. I don't know what pelmeni is. It's a Russian. Alright, that certainly more looks like a Chinese dumpling. But you have to remember, Russia is so incredibly large that it goes all the way to China. But they're saying ancient Greece. I mean, it kind of could look like those Italian, what are they called? Meat filling and stuff inside. I don't remember the American word. Alright, it's been a while. I think we should stop for now, but, I'll do more. Maybe next time we'll do, Rate My Bread, or a bread doctor. kind of deal. I hope to see you all again. Thank you for coming, and see you very soon. Bye, guys. Oh yeah, that's right, Charlene. Tortellini. That's what I was thinking of. Thank you, Fard. Bye. Have fun and great baking to everyone.